Welcome in. The Steelers have made another big offseason move. Players are reacting to it. We're about to react to it. Plus, should the Steelers take these TJ Watt trade calls seriously? And big picture, where are we going in 2025? What is the organizational identity as training camp approaches? Let's do this.
Van to the corner of the end zone. Oh, for a touchdown!
All right, welcome into episode 1 of the Noll Road, where we talk about what it's going to take to get the Steelers back to the glory days. New Bear Lesniewski is the SEC all-academic lineman from Kentucky, now broadcasting 3.2 miles west of Heinz Field. Master's degree in sports from Duquesne. I'm Gavin Dawson for 105.3 The Fan, home of the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas-Fort Worth. And New Bear and I know each other from way back in sports radio in Portland, actually, of all places. We've been talking about doing this podcast for a long time. This last couple of weeks just kind of shoved us into the space. So, howdy. How the hell are you, New Bear?
What did I do? I screamed. You literally said, stop everything else. This starts now after Minka is getting sent out of town.
And let's start with that, New Bear. I'm coming into this with more curiosity than strident opinions, at least for now. I imagine that'll last at least a show or two before I start shooting my loud mouth off about this football team. But, I mean, huge week of news once again with another trade. What's the goal of these moves? Are they in win-now mode? It really doesn't seem like it. If you're going to add Rodgers and you want to add Ramsey and you want to add a Metcalf, fine. Just keep Pickens and Fitzpatrick, and now maybe you're close to having a contender.
There really wasn't a post-Ben plan, and that's been the big problem. I mean, the best plan they had was overdrafting Kenny Pickett. And in the year-to-year quarterback carousel since then, if you're basically letting Aaron Rodgers hold you hostage and you're waiting around for him to decide if he's going to play at all, then that has to be the mode that they've entered, because there's really no other way to justify some of these other moves that are really against the way that they've traditionally done business, that signal, and what you're seeing from Twitter sphere at all, is that the Steelers are in when it's a Super Bowl or bust, because it's Aaron Rodgers, it's player for player swaps, it's big spending and giving up draft capital for DK Metcalf. They're doing things that are typically not the way that they're going to run the offseason.
Yeah, that's fascinating from the outside looking in, just how stable this organization was. I mean, for the first 20 years of this century, and how different the last 5 have been. This is more big name trades than I would think I've ever experienced in my entire life.
Well, and that's the greatness of Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, he's somebody, not just as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan or someone who lives here and is literally sending his kids to the same school that Bill Cowher went to, and his house is blocks from my house here in the neighborhood, and just thinking about all the different pieces of connective tissue in my life with the Three Rivers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, I've been a fan since the Jerome Bettis trade. Shout out Rich Brooks, who tried to ruin his career in LA and let him reinvent himself here in the Steel City. And, as a Golden Domer with, my family's, Irish Catholic O' Shamrock shit. So it's been a long time thing for me, going back to my childhood. And now to have my own children growing up rooting for this team feels different because of what you just talked about, and the stability, the standard being the standard. And unfortunately, that line has really become almost a useless platitude. It's become a meme, because the standard is, don't have a losing season and get the brakes beat off you in the wild card round.
Being in the middle ground is tough. I think there are a lot of teams that fall into that trap in the NFL, because every year is just so tempting to build a team that's capable of competing. But answer the question here, New Bear, 2025 with Rodgers, it's going to be one of the best defenses. You know how I am with the run game. Can the Steelers with a rookie and Caleb Johnson, this offensive line, and 4 quality tight ends now? I mean, the Jonnu Smith trade, as much as it's a Jalen Ramsey trade, it could impact the offense. But what do you think about the outlook of this football team right now? Like, is there legitimate Steelers excitement adding a Hall of Famer at quarterback to what they have?
Andrew Filipponi here locally is one of the guys who loves to talk about and has been talking about for years, not just what should be the best defense, but the most expensive defense. And if Mike Tomlin's a defensive guru and you count his $20 million salary, then this is a $200 million defense. And that's before they do anything or don't with TJ Watt. And when you talk about what this defense has not done in the playoffs, 40 plus points, really quitting last year against the Ravens, giving up 299 rushing yards in a game that finishes 28-14, but was never close. It was 21-0, 28-7. This is a $200 million defense that now has a 4-time MVP, a former Super Bowl win. And say what you want about Aaron Rodgers not being on the wrong side of 30, but 40 plus Achilles, plus the drama where he wasn't just controlling the offense and the quarterback room. He basically ran the front office with the Jets, and we all know how unpleasantly it ended in Green Bay. So there's no way you can look at Aaron Rodgers, the DK Metcalf move, shipping Pickens out of town, and doing all these things yesterday with the shockwaves from the Minkah Fitzpatrick move, and not this year to year, not really having a plan, trying to figure it out, particularly in the quarterback room, where if you don't have a guy, you don't have a chance. Now they're at least saying Aaron Rodgers gives us that. The main question back to you is, I know you're an Artie Smith fan. I know you have questions, comments, concerns, thinking about what the hell is this offense going to look like when Aaron Rodgers is the one changing the plays?
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and we'll see. I do think at this stage in Aaron Rodgers' career, they got to try to build an offense where he's passing 25 to 30 times a game. So I think it's going to come down to the run game. But he can still be an efficient quarterback for sure, and he opens things up. But just your lack of weapons on the outside, I think almost mandates at this point, unless one of these young wide receivers comes around and is a secondary star, and we've seen that happen several times in Aaron Rodgers' career. But yeah, the offense, what is Aaron Rodgers comfortable with? I know at the end of Aaron Rodgers' Mike McCarthy run, they were at each other's throats about how much motion and how much play action should be in the offense, and Aaron Rodgers was very resistant to it. Then LaFleur comes in and suddenly he's open-minded to it. Then he goes to the Jets where he has all the autonomy and power to do whatever the hell he wants, not only with the front office, but with the offense. What does this look like? Because if you can get good offensive line play, and Caleb Johnson is a good rookie, and Aaron Rodgers handling the ball, I think it has the potential to be a very exciting offense with Arthur Smith. I'm just dumbfounded about how it got so static last year. And that was one of my biggest questions coming in for you. How did that happen? Is that a Mike Tomlin thing? Did they decide our quarterbacks aren't savvy enough? Did they decide our young offensive linemen can't handle this complicated of a blocking scheme? But if you have motion and misdirection in Atlanta, and you're getting rave reviews from the league to the point that you step right out of getting fired and you're named OC of the Steelers, how does that suddenly disappear? And if you're the GM and the head coach, I would be thinking, Art, what the hell are we doing? This is not what we paid for.
It's a fascinating thing, right? The term typically comes back to Mike Tomlin wants to get in a rock fight, right? Mike Tomlin wants to win 19-17. He loves his defense. Mike Tomlin would punt on third down if sometimes we look at the way that they just run into a brick wall and are not just stagnant but also predictable. And one of the things,
why would you hire that guy though and then take all that away? You're saying Tomlin just stripped down the Arthur Smith offense?
So the Arthur Smith offense in and of itself is predicated on the running game. Everyone loves to talk about how he likes to get the tight ends involved, and there's typically one wide receiver that's 150 plus target guy. Well, if shout out DK Metcalf fantasy owners, right? The other thing about it is not throwing the ball in the middle of the field. That's a big warning sign, bugaboo. And you're not trusting Mitch Trubisky. You didn't trust Justin Fields. You didn't trust young Kenny Pickett. And quite frankly, going back before Arthur Smith with Matt Canada, this is something that has been going on for a lot more than just last year. And it's not just weapons. It's the way that they want to attack and also not put themselves in position to make mistakes. Look at George Pickens' route tree. One of the things that's going to be the most interesting to see about George Pickens in Dallas, particularly playing off CeeDee Lamb, which is why we were so damn excited about him and DK on opposite sides, is that you were hopefully finally going to get to see George Pickens run more than 0-1-9. you're hopefully going to get to see him work the middle of the field like he did with Mason Rudolph on the epic 3-game stretch to get them into the playoffs, where you see him take a 7-yard slant and go 77 and bang his head on the goalpost.
I mean, it's cool. It's romantic. We're in the Stone Ages. We're going to have the best defense and play smash mouth offense. Can you win in today's NFL with that kind of approach? I think so, but you better have better players at almost every position. Like, you better be aggressive in free agency in the trade market, building out a roster that can win every matchup across the field.
One of the big things that's been holding that back has been the play up front. And I think one of the reasons you're hoping Roman Wilson is going to finally get out of the doghouse and be wide receiver 2. They're so starving for this kid to break out that they're showing him catching passes on air in like literally against no one and tweeting it out about, his breakout season. He basically redshirted as a rookie. What you look at the team up front now, you're talking about a pair of first-round bookend tackles. You're talking about Sayamalu being a guy that you think what you're getting out of that big bad dude. And then you might have the best young pivot in football in Zach Frazier. So you go from Dan Moore Jr., who was a try-hard guy that Tomlin basically rewarded year over year for how he worked himself into being an NFL football player, because everyone here and most of the national media, even PFF from year to year, week to week, talked about how much this dude struggled. What that did more so than Dan Moore Jr. himself was shoving Broderick Jones to right tackle, not his natural position, not what you traded up to draft him to do. So now you have Sayamalu coming up, not Sayamalu, Fatanu coming off the rookie year where he had the knee and he basically redshirted medical, but he's expected to step in and now slide Broderick back over to left and have this wonderful bookend. So
there's some hope there.
Hope there up front for sure.
Yeah.
That's been the thing where, when you're on G-Bag Nation and you're in Dallas talking about Dak Prescott struggling with pressure in his face, that's been a really big problem at every level from left to right across this offense for the past few years. And now they're looking at that hopefully being a strength heading into 2025.
Okay, next branch on this topic tree is it's our debut show on the Noll Road. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying the conversation. Maybe the like, maybe even the bell button. Never miss an upload. We'll be here with you all the way through training camp in this 2025 season, hopefully the playoffs. Next branch on the topic tree is, should it concern you that high-profile players around this trade on the team, former players, are frustrated? It seems a little bit adversarial, so we can talk about the X's and O's and how good you are on the depth chart here and there, but, I mean, culturally, where is this Steelers team? Here's Patrick Queen, having his guy Minka's back. I mean, you kind of like traded away a guy that it seems like everybody on the team loves. And then you have George Pickens. Now, George Pickens is toxic. So I don't know how you take this, but he's social mediating like, man, congratulations, you got out of here. Big win. Beautiful times are ahead, buddy. What are these guys saying, and is that concerning, or is that just kind of like what happens when players get moved?
Today's era is different, right? These players are different, and social media makes it different. I mean, you saw a lot of guys in Miami saying similar things about Jonnu and Jalen getting out of Miami, saying, "Oh, hey, you play good for Miami, you get traded away. You make the Pro Bowl, you get traded away, and in theory, you're going to a better place." The challenge in Pittsburgh is the narrative and the want to control it. A lot of it's about the control of what the story is. You saw it with the Pickens thing with the camp and Freiermuth stepping in to fill in for him, and all the different stories, raging from Twitter to WTAE here locally, where they put a local family on and basically had the kid cry for the cameras about not getting to meet toxic George Pickens. The thing that's really fun thinking about the split, the divide, right? There's a national media that loves Tomlin. There's a local media that even Ryan Clark is now stepping up and saying his messages run stale and it's time for a change. And whenever you see this happen, whether it was the wide receiver room going from AB through Pickens with, the Martavius Bryants and the Juju Smith-Schusters in between, and now here with Minka on his way out of town, is there's a clear black and white dividing line. You're seeing tweets, you're seeing talk where you're seeing players say things like, 10 guys were communicating and one guy wasn't. Half the people in the room are saying it was Cam Sutton. Now that Minka's gone, they're jumping on that and saying, no, it was Minka. They're trying to paint him in a bad light to justify really everything that they're doing, shipping him south.
Yeah, it's tough to see. I think things get sensitive when contracts become involved, and when you trade players, they can take it personal. There's this feeling of rejection, after being at the top of their place. It just doesn't make sense in their narrative. So I guess the organization is the bad guy. Whenever players leave the Cowboys, you get some of it. But, I think that, along with this organization, like trying to maybe become different under Omar Khan and still beholden to the past of Mike Tomlin, it just seems like this organization needs a fresh start, and I think that's a good opportunity to get your thoughts on, could this be Mike Tomlin's final season? I think with all the 500 seasons, that reminds me of Jason Garrett. I don't see that as success. I see that as part of the problem. If you have control of the organization and you can't see the value in, hey, let's be bad until we get an all-pro level quarterback, or at least a Pro Bowl level quarterback. Like sitting here spinning your wheels for the last 5 years, I think it's a clear sign. Like how could you look at Mitch Trubisky? How could you look at Russell Wilson or Justin Fields as the answer better than, hey, instead of going 9-8 this year, how about we go 4-13 and have a shot at Arch Manning or Garrett Nussmeier or Sellers at South Carolina? I mean, Cade Klubnik. We're about to enter a 2-year period where franchise quarterbacks are available, and the Steelers are a freight train heading for another 500 season.
Will literally never happen in Pittsburgh. That message that does not play. That's not how the Rooneys do business. Like the nature of injury luck, fumble luck, all the things that go, the best ability is availability, and the healthiest team wins. There's so much variance from year to year where you see teams go from worst to first and make those jumps, that what you're talking about is reasonable. You bottom out, you get the quarterback of the future, but then you go, well, how many first round quarterbacks actually hit? Look what we just went through with Kenny Pickett. And if you're sitting here saying we can go win the division, we can host a home playoff game, if you win a couple more of those, you're potentially getting the bye, and you're in the conversation to buy yourself time to really get into that 1 week battle and pick someone else apart. The problem is, as you look at the way they've done business, they missed on not just quarterback and not having an answer for Ben, but pretty much position by position, first, second, third round. They missed for years at the end of Colbert's reign before Khan coming in. They had really just kind of done things a certain way, and the game starts to pass you by. And you see what happens with Chuck Noll into Bill Cowher into Mike Tomlin, where you get that fresh start. The Rooneys would love to have Tomlin coach forever. He ostensibly has a lifetime contract. The noise, the pressure has gotten loud enough to the point where you say, maybe we do need to change. Maybe we do need to do something different. It's just a question of, what does that mean next year? What does that mean beyond Aaron Rodgers? Because the reports were that he wanted a 2-year contract. They were only willing to give him one. So now are you saying it's Will Howard? Or now are you saying you're going to grab and cull and mine all this draft capital to potentially move up and make a play for an Arch Manning next year and go 10-7 and make the playoffs? Like, they're trying to do everything at the same time. And what's exciting about it as a fan, exciting about it as a local, is that they are doing things differently. They are making some splashes. They are moving some capital. They are spending some money. They have had really good drafts back to back, and this roster looks really good on paper. The challenge becomes, you move Minka Fitzpatrick. Are you now saying Jalen Ramsey's going to move to safety? Because right now, Juan Thornhill's your free safety. The question becomes, are you going to move TJ Watt? Because are you saying that you're just good, Alec Highsmith, you're good, Nate Herbig? Because all of a sudden you make one of these moves, and it's not just one thing, one player for another player. One thing potentially changes everything else.
Yeah, and I think if you're truly going for it, you're adding players, not swapping out players. Like, I just don't think this organization is serious about being championship status. Reminds me a lot of the Cowboys, how we have past success. Our brand is global. We can sit here and print money as long as we don't do anything crazy and go into the cellar. All 17 of our games are relevant. It's very similar to the Cowboys playbook of maximizing return on investment instead of trying to go for the Super Bowl, because going for the Super Bowl, there's a downside. If we don't get there and we spend all of these resources, then maybe we're bad for 5 years, and we don't want to have that happen. we don't want to be a really bad football team because then our fan base might actually stop buying season tickets, and our ratings might be bad for a couple of years. Man, that would be a real problem. So I think this happened to the Bears. I think it happened to the Packers. I think it's happening to the Cowboys. And this is why it's so easy for teams that really want to go for it to win. Hey, let's not settle for so-so quarterbacks. Let's get great quarterback play. And then when we're close, let's add a bunch of all pros and pro bowlers, and only a handful of teams are doing that, New Bear. Like, that's why I have a hard time blaming this on Mike Tomlin. The front office has not given him much to work with. Here you go. Have a great defense again, sir.
Look, there's plenty of blame to go around. But when
Sure.
you talk about drafting way over drafting Kenny Pickett, because he's the most pro-ready quarterback in that draft, and when he's really probably a third-round talent, because he was the guy next door, and you got to look at him for 5 years because they share a practice facility. Like, when you talk about who's really making the call, when you talk about who's really running the show, as much as you want to give credit to Omar Khan, I don't think much is getting blessed without Tomlin green lighting at rubber stamp.
Wasn't that okay? So that's an interesting question I had as well. Wasn't that Kevin Colbert's last pick?
So what he wanted to do,
was he still in charge?
He wanted Ozzie Newsome. He wanted the Lamar Jackson Ozzie. He wanted to give them the next great quarterback. And I think the problem is they wanted it to be a great story. And that matters because they passed on Marino. And that was the other narrative it's the local kid. And he led Pitt to the conference championship. He did all these he's Jersey tough, right?
That's thinking with your trauma, man. That's not good.
It's a great story. And then the real problem, a lot of things to get into on Kenny Pickett. That's a whole nother podcast, breaking down Steelers quarterbacks, or even just getting into the Kenny Pickett stuff in particular. But the real problem was what you were just talking about, where there's a depleted roster because you've missed on high draft picks. There is a dearth of playmakers. There is basically a revolving door at left tackle, if not, the bulk of the offensive line. And then you throw this kid in and you neuter him. You throw this kid in and you don't let George Pickens run the full route tree. You throw this kid in and you're afraid to throw the ball over the middle of the field because you're worried about making a mistake. And the one thing that was really interesting about the Kenny Pickett narrative was they'd go through three and a half quarters. It'd be 13-10. It'd be 16-13. And then they'd get into game-winning drive mode, and he would make a play. And it was very much like Roethlisberger at the end, kind of saying, bleep you, Canada. I'm calling this shit at the line of scrimmage. And
I love it.
He's kind of doing his own thing. And there was a lot of swag, and there were a lot of people who just wanted Kenny Pickett unleashed, just like there were people who wanted Justin Fields unleashed. Now, no one was calling for that with Mitch Trubisky, but when you look at guys who could make plays, whether that's running or throwing or the ability to do both, there's a really big hamstring with the way that they want to do business on the offensive side of football, almost irrespective of who's under center.
I mean, running scared, running conservative, the coaching staff, the front office. I think that's a common trend, and that leadership theme kind of flows from the top, from what I can tell anyway. What do you think? Leave your comments down below. Please like the video if you're rocking with us. Up next here on the Noll Road, what do you make of teams calling around about TJ Watt, brother? I think let me have a strong take here. I think championship organizations would trade TJ Watt right now. He's coming up on 31 years old. He wants huge money. Just go ahead and get the draft picks that might set you up to trade up and get a quarterback after your next 500 season.
Yeah, the question becomes, how much are they? What's the price, right? If you're the Detroit Lions and you went through everything you went through last year with Hutchinson going down, and then you're just the whole defense basically being on IR, and that destroying what for all intents and purposes looked like a Super Bowl season. If you're one of these teams that thinks you're a pass rusher away, are you willing to give up a 1? Are you willing to give up a 2, 5?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think you're going to get two years of TJ Watt maybe being the best edge in the game still.
He's got a ton of juice in the tank. There's a bit of a narrative that's rising here locally because he's never won a playoff game, that he's not a winner. And what I struggle with is if you see what's going to happen, if he goes to a contender, if he goes to a place like Detroit where they play off of Hutchinson, one of the big problems that everyone has with the way the Steelers use TJ Watt, some of which is mitigated because he's one of those true edge guys who in the past has dropped off. He's made picks, he's made splash plays. as more of a linebacker as opposed to just an edge rusher defensive end. And he also gets hurt. He gets clipped on an interception return, or he otherwise
He
finds a
hasn't missed a
way.
lot of games, and he stops the run.
Right. And so
I mean, this is a dream come true to have a player like this.
What I'm saying is that everyone talking about him falling off last year and only having 11 and a half sacks and not having a counting stat in the playoff game.
Yeah.
One of the challenges when you watch the Steelers from week to week is exactly where TJ Watt's going to be. He's going to line up over right tackle. He's going to get in that sprinter stance, and he's going to be challenged to go hunt the quarterback. Fine. He is excellent at doing that. What you don't see are a ton of stunts. What you don't see is him switch sides, kick inside. What you don't see is all the games that Myles Garrett gets to play, Micah Parsons gets to play, etc. The guys who are like TJ Watt get moved around and get the defense or the offense isn't just able to dictate, oh, we're going to chip. Oh, we're going to throw this screen right behind him because we're going to take advantage of his over pursuit. And then what happens when you're in a rock fight and you get into the fourth quarter and you're down a possession and you need that ball back is TJ does take some risks. And he might jump inside and try to make that 3-yard TFL and miss. Or he might try to go for the peanut punch because they got to get that ball back and it doesn't happen. And then now all of a sudden you're talking about, oh, wow, he really fell off. He only forced 4 fumbles instead of 6 or 8. And you really start looking at the totality of his work and you go, this is a guy who is in great shape. Like you said, hasn't missed a ton of games, hasn't had a ton of catastrophic injuries, but he's also one of these guys. He gets a lot of crap for tapping out and taking himself out. And you look up and you go, huh, it's the fourth quarter. Why are Herbig and Highsmith out? And instead of it being a conversation about depth, and instead of it being a conversation about let's not have this guy being out there putting himself in a position where he's pulling a hamstring because he's playing 99% of the snaps, it comes back to, well, he's never won a playoff game. It comes back to, well, he didn't have a counting stat. He's 31 years old. And now you're shifting the narrative away. And what's crazy about it is if you're allowing that to happen, you're downgrading his tradability. You're saying, well, he's still the best. Look at all these things. We want a 1, but now they've allowed this thing to happen where there's no chance they're going to get what they're asking for from him. That's the other big element of this equation.
Well,
they're going to have to take less.
The Aaron Rodgers situation complicates it because if you have Rodgers, ideally things could come together for you if the young offensive line hits and a young wide receiver develops well for you. Like TJ Watt is your ticket to the best defense in the NFL. So ideally, you would wait to see how the first month of the season plays out and then make your decision. But TJ Watt wants the contract before he steps back on the field again. So it's a sticky situation. I would have just not gotten Aaron Rodgers, moved on from TJ Watt sometime in March and tried to set ourselves up to get the next quarterback. But what you said about this team never wanting to take a season off or take a step back, I think that's fairly common around the NFL because of how profitable every NFL Sunday is and how easy it is, to sell people on the idea that we're going for it. Like if you're really drilling down into blogs and podcasts and paying attention, it's a long shot to believe the Steelers could go all the way this year. But in a sport where fans are global and counted by the millions, not the tens of thousands that tune in for a podcast or read a blog, the NFL fan base is a lot more ignorant than I think they are considered, by us, because we're in the trenches every day debating this stuff.
Well, a big part of the Steelers' ignorance in this whole thing is the disrespect to TJ Watt and the public way that it plays out, because you're talking about a guy who's been Defensive Player of the Year, perennial Pro Bowler, perennial All-Pro, and perennial candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. You can argue that Myles Garrett stole one, and even Aaron Donald stole one. This is a guy who's a gold jacket guy, a first ballot gold jacket guy who should be a one helmet guy. And you're allowing Aaron Rodgers to hold the team hostage. That's one thing, fine, because you think he's the quarterback to get you to the Super Bowl. But you're also allowing the narrative to leak and linger that we can't pay TJ because we don't know how much we're going to have to pay Aaron Rodgers, when you should just be figuring out how to pay TJ. You're signing other free agents. You're giving up a second-round draft pick and giving $150 million to DK Metcalf. And TJ's looking around going, you're paying these guys who haven't been here. You're paying these guys where they were. DK Metcalf won All-Pro 2 season. DK Metcalf's an every other year 1,000-yard guy. DK Metcalf getting $30 million a year second-round draft pick you gave up for him, Aaron Rodgers lingering out there in the distance, and you're not going to pay a guy who's just bleeding and sweating inside this building. You're not going to pay a guy who defines everything that your culture is supposed to be about. It's the level of disrespect for me that just comes back to the way that they do business, rubbing people the wrong way.
I love it, New Bear. And I love this journey that we're about to go on here down the Noll Road, looking for number 7. What do we got to tell the people about here to look forward to? You know, obviously multiple long form shows a week, regular shorts there if you like to swipe. We got to have a blog site going up soon. I know how much you like to write and spin that poetry, that art, I like to call it.
Appreciate that. Well, and you are such a fun guy on the news side too, because you love to just get what's on the ticker. How do we have it? What's the take? How do we get into, you know, if they're saying this, is that really the truth, or is there data or gut check stuff that maybe says otherwise, and then going back and forth on? I think the journey, right? That's a great word for it, because we're talking about, you know, this team, we're talking about the league at large, and what's really great about the brand is that it is global. They're going to be in Ireland. The Roonies were ambassadors to Ireland. This is arguably, you know, one of the top brands in sports across sports. And coming out of Pittsburgh, you know, this is year 10 for us here in the city, and thinking about my kids, you know, going to school where Bill Cowher went to school, you know, and being Pittsburgh kids, and being Lesniewski's in a city that's got, I think, the most per capita Polacks. It's a really neat thing for me to dig into, and I just appreciate the platform to be able to talk about it with you.
Well, tell us down below, who are the YouTube Steelers shows that you like? Just go ahead and tag them, you know, put them in there. We'll jump on there and subscribe. Maybe we'll see you in the chats over there, but we want to get active with you guys in the comments. So give us your thoughts as well on any of the topics that we discussed. Again, like the video. We'll be back soon. For New Bear, I'm Dawson, and we'll see you next time on the Noll Road.